We're at 2 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order. Several items to work through today, but just to get rolling, any declarations of conflict of interest or other items that need to be discussed along those lines? Nope. So don't have any, so we're going to continue on. So the first item is to approve the agenda. Just to walk it through, we've asked for a little bit more financial information, which I see something circulating here. There was also a discussion around comparable municipalities, and there was a conference happening between then and now, right? So we should have a little bit of an update on that side of things. And then we've also been working towards this vendor fair on the 28th of August, so that'll be the other item to discuss. And I don't think there was any other feedback or updates to the agenda after that was sent out about a week ago. So does someone want to make a motion to adopt the agenda for the meeting? Bill Meredith, okay. Jazz, we'll take you. So. Yeah, thank you. Okay, good. So the next thing is we did have minutes from the last meeting. I don't know if folks have had a chance to go through that in any detail. But the next item is to approve the minutes for our last meeting. Any comments or discussion there? Go ahead, Scott.
I have a question about I know everybody was supposed to be here with suggestions on their own. I unfortunately couldn't make it. Was there any further detail to anybody else's suggestions? Because I didn't really have a chance to, well, I didn't find them in the minutes. I just wondered if there is kind of any kind of record of what other people's ideas were for how they envision the future of the parking program.
Through Mr. Chair. So the direction was to come back to this meeting and discuss. So we haven't talked about comparables to other municipalities yet. So that's one of the agenda items for today.
But I think Scott's question was maybe a little bit more towards documenting the suggestions that people had made, right? Because that was the sort of the activity of the last meeting, was to have some discussion or people come to the table. I think the way we kind of said it was, you know, let's go in and just see where everybody's at and see what people are thinking. And so I don't think those specifics did get recorded in the minutes. Maybe, you know, maybe what we need to do is have a bit of a follow-up just to capture those things. I had put together a slide presentation. It would be in the video and that sort of thing. And the video itself would have some documentation of it, right? Just from the conversation. But yeah, we didn't actually get those written down, I suppose. So it is a fair point, right? That maybe we try to summarize that.
So through Mr. Chair, so when we do the minutes don't go into that much of a detail. We don't say, you know, member so-and-so provided this example, staff provided this response. We don't go into that much detail with the minutes. That's how the minutes usually work in through council and committees of council as well. Thank you.
Yeah, which makes sense, but maybe we could have a follow-up just to put together a bit of a doc, right, to summarize the perspectives from the committee members, right, have been asked to provide their input. So we could probably do that as a secondary item, right, or another documentation thing we can do as part of the work here.
Or perhaps I'll just watch the video. I mean, where's the video available? Yeah.
Through Mr. Chair, so the video is available on the municipal website, I believe. We can always circulate that to the committee so that they have so they know where the path is, where it's saved on the website. So we can make note of that to send the previous meeting as well as this meeting once it's finalized.
Thank you. So I basically just presented basic kind of machines that were, you know, seen in Toronto, Collingwood, all had you know, multiple payment strategies, whether it's payment methods, sorry, coin, tap, the green P, and so forth. And then I further went on to kind of get some information for you know, other communities, what they do. And then I was in talks with Owen Sound, which it was on this agenda here. There's a breakdown of what they do in their DIA, their district, but we can get into that further with that. And then we requested in the minutes for staff to come back with some comparables of what communities. So I think everybody had their own ideas, but mine was just basically a very simple, easy instructions on the machines. And if we're going to go down that route, so basically user friendly. Yeah, correct. Not just staff, but the committee come back with examples of that. So, and hopefully that's what we're here today to do. Somewhat.
Okay, so with that, does someone want to make a motion to approve the minutes from the July 25th meeting? Bill Meredith, yeah. Seconder, Mr. Matteau. All right, so moving along, the next item is a review of requested financial information. I know Mr. Smiley was going to be out and he's obviously not here, so how are we going to handle that side of things?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the financials, the CFO has joined us today. If there's questions on that, we just want to make sure that we're not diving too far into the weeds on this. The CFO does have a hard stop, so that's why I'm saying we don't want to get chew up too much time on a certain item if there's other questions that she may be able to answer on the financial. So I'm not sure if I'll turn it to Lindsay or if I'll just put it out to the committee, and if they've got questions, then Lindsay can provide a response. Thank you.
Just a quick question through you, Steve. Did everybody get the financials that you sent me on the latest, the bylaw? There, so as of July 31st. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the clerk did circulate those to the committee on Tuesday afternoon, I believe. We don't have a way to put it on screen, so everybody should have it. Can certainly answer any questions that the committee has. Sure.
So through you, Chair, I didn't see any snow removal in the expenses. Is that part of the ground maintenance or does it go under repair and maintenance? Because there's two maintenance there. Thank you.
So previously, and I know I prepared the sort of the 10-year parking costs for the committee a few meetings back. It was shown under ground maintenance. For this year's budget process, we actually broke it down a little bit further. And so the 149,000, I believe is the number, is broken down into labor, it's broken down into equipment, materials, and there's one other line that I can certainly find the email and let you know what those numbers are. Because that is really reflective in what it is that we're doing for those lots, right? So it's not only snow clearing, it's patching, it's the line painting, all of that. And so that charge of 149,000 is meant to capture as best as possible of what that costs. Noting that we don't track our time to that specific detail, right? So it's an allocation, but it is based on, a mathematical calculation. I can find the email if you just give me a few minutes here. I can tell you exactly what those breakdowns are.
Go ahead, Karen.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to CFO. Can you just clarify, is the amounts that we're talking about in here specific to the lots, or is it involve street clearing as well?
So my understanding is that sorry, it's 152,400 actually is the amount, is specific to the municipal parking lots. And so winter maintenance is 89,000. Sign materials, and I believe this was circulated to the committee because I know I had provided it to Mr. Smiley. Sign materials and installs and maintenance, 2,400. Line painting, 5,700. Asphalt repairs, 3,800. Street light repairs and inspections, 9,500. And I should note that, the next one, annual average capital contribution to replace one pole every 5 years, 3,000. I think one pole alone is about 10,000 to replace. Sweeping, 29,000, garbage pickup, lawn care, and general maintenance is a 10,000. So that totals 152,000. So you'll see that 152,000 sort of within those various lines in the statement that I prepared for today's meeting.
Thank you, through you, Steve. So when I'm looking at the January 1st to January 31st, parking enforcement, strictly parking enforcement, that was circulated, that report was circulated. Yep. So we have total revenue of actuals, as of January 31st, 48,288. So, and this is where I kind of wanted to kind of break down to see if these meters and how much revenue they would support through our expenses, and see where that kind of total would be, and to see if meters were actually the way to go. Because if we're going to be in a deficit of $250,000 or $200,000 after we have a parking program in place, that's not where I believe this committee wants to be, nor does it want to present that to council, right? So so if we're adding in you know, and I'm trying to take out, you know, that you have grounds maintenance of 15,778 right now, but that includes you know, 16 of the new boulders that were in place for the parking machines. So I'm trying to take all that out and strictly go from salaries and benefits, parking salaries and benefits, not and I believe you said in the email it's 25% of the actual total is attributed to the parking enforcement. And when we talk about parking enforcement, are we talking about parking enforcement overall, the community, or just in the specific areas that we're trying to put to catch revenue from with machines or a parking program?
And so that would be definitely a question for Mr. Smiley, but so this year we don't have a parking program per se, as in a metered program. We have the boat launch, right, where we are enforcing that area. So obviously there's some staff time associated with that. There's the work to remove all of the old parking meters that took place, and sort of that coordination, as well as sort of the work that's being done by the committee. And so again, this is an estimate from the manager of bylaw on how much time, again, his staff has been spending essentially managing a non-parking program. The piece that I want to sort of bring the committee's attention to is some of these costs we're simply trying to offset, right? So the ground maintenance line, or what used to be the ground maintenance line of the winter maintenance and whatnot. I mean, those are costs that we're going to incur regardless, right? Those are the costs that we're essentially trying to recover through a paid parking program. The problem is, in the past, the program wasn't earning more than the incremental costs of operating the program. So if you have a program, but then you need to add more staff time, and as you know, right, we see this in other areas, more staff time, more, administrative tasks, that doesn't make sense, right? You need a program that can make use of existing resources to earn that above, so that it does start paying towards the taxes, the maintenance, which I believe, and again, I wasn't here at that time, but I believe that was the intention of the program, right? To try and offset some of those costs that are just there, that the municipality and the taxpayer is paying. Right.
Thank you. And this is where, through you, Steve, is again, when I'm looking at this, when you have those type of, those administrative costs, labor costs that we're experiencing right now, that when in 2025, if a parking program comes through, hopefully we won't have that, like the removal of the machines and all that. I wanted to strip that all away, strip everything away that, okay, if we just have a parking program without any problems, but we have the expense of the machines, we have the, labor and so forth, we have revenue, ticketing and so forth. What does that look like instead of having all these other, numbers in here, and where does that take us? And are we in a huge deficit, or are we relatively close to break even? And that's where I'm trying to justify not what our incurred costs are now, but we strip all those costs that from the old parking program that we're paying for in 2024. But in 2025, we won't have those because they're already paid in 2024. So if we looked at revenue generating, or even right now, like when we have, the majority is in boat launch, right? Street and daily rate parking, we have $2,148 in revenue, right? So that amounts probably to, I'm guessing some permits and so forth. I mean, our fines are up there. So we right. Yeah, so that's kind of right. I'm looking, when I'm looking at January 1 to January 31st, I know okay, so you're saying that 17,000, let's say half of it or even more was from last year, which is in our 2024 financials. That's not our true figure, honestly, for 2024. So when the program was when we started from a kind of a clean slate without the previous parking issues that we've had. So, and I'm just trying to get that clear number of what are our actuals from January 1st for this year up to January 31st. Strip away all that stuff that won't even be those expenses that won't even be here in 2025, right? And then where are we at? And that's kind of what I was trying to get to here. You always have vehicle equipment and facility rentals, 33,000. I mean, there's some, we have taxes, 50,000. So repairs and maintenance of 32. So these must be numbers from, are they carried over from 2023?
The repairs and maintenance line, so I did have a asterisk, I just need to read that again. And so that really was the cost of the removals, right? And so, yeah, we basically had to provide 16 new stainless steel bollards, right, in order to replace those parking meters downtown. So that, you're right, that's a one-time cost. And you'll also notice we didn't budget for it, right? So that was really my reason back to you when you asked me, well, what's the impact to the 2025 budget? There is none, because we didn't budget for that additional removal cost. We also didn't budget for the expected revenue of the 70 machines, right? Because those are one-time costs in nature that will just sort of flow through the budget essentially, right? So there's, in 2025, there's no surplus coming, right, in this situation.
Somebody else can have questions here. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee. So I'm just going back on some of the financials that were provided to us in a previous meeting that showed revenues. And even if we strip back the 32,000 that we were just talking about for removal of the old meters, and even if we stripped back the transfer to reserve, we're still at for 7 months of the year, because this statement that we were provided today is 7 months, that's around 200,000. In our best year over the last 10 years, the parking program only ever brought in 205,000 in its best year. So we're already in 7 months. The expenses are exceeding what we've ever brought in revenue for one full year. I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, and this is what I'm trying to get at, but there's also 2023 expenses, right, carried over into 2024. So that number would be lower, but not still. And that's the number I'm trying to hone in on, right, and see what that actual those actual revenues and if there's a narrowing of the gap between revenues and expenses without all the other ones that we won't be experiencing in 2025 because of the old meters. So
Through you, Chair. So I think I saw that 10-year was 189. We're gonna probably hover around 200, but we're not selling any permits, are we? Parking passes? Is that correct? To any businesses or like
Currently,
currently?
No,
So there's no
no.
revenue on that. So my
sorry.
guess is, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. Keep going.
So my guess is probably there's 200 to 300 people we could potentially sell passes to or more. And we don't have to spend money to make money, is what I'm trying to tell the committee. If the businesses were to absorb the cost on their own and pay a certain fee, then there's no reason to spend money to make money, because parking meters will be a cost. So you have to cover that cost. So there has to be a certain rate set to cover that cost. So I don't know what the total number of cars are out there, businesses wise. But to keep the cost low for the customers maybe, or keep it free, my suggestion or my thought is the average cost right now is going to be 200,000 to run these lots. So we have to get together and figure out what is the best solution rather than trying to, play with these $5,000, $10,000 numbers. There is a cost, and the cost is 200,000. Let's figure out a solution. That's what I'm suggesting. Thank you.
through you,
Bill.
and if your 200,000 is correct, but right now it's hypothetical, then we'll be able to make a decision, right? So, and that's where I'm stuck on. I can't go on hypotheticals. I need to go on the data that's going to be presented to us and trying to figure that out. And so, because that 200,000 could be 300,000. I don't know. Could be 50,000. I don't know. So,
Well, and
so in
or-
that theory, I know where I don't disagree with you, but I just need to know where that cost is. Another question I would like to ask is and I think if we don't have a parking program 2025, right? And we go on, how much of the tax rate is affected through the expense of not having a parking program would be borne by the taxpayers of Midland? Because in 2024, right now, this is borne on the tax base. But if we strip away, and the majority of the expenses will be gone for 2025 because of the machines already gone and so forth, those expenses have been already paid out in, I believe, 2024's budget. So, remove and all that, right? So in 2025 it would be the question is how much is borne by the tax rate? What is that number? Is it 1%? Is it 0.5%? And that would be the question that would be interesting, because if we don't have a parking program in 2025, if we're not ready, then someone has to pay for downtown expenses, whether it's right. So what does that look like? Maybe we don't have a parking program maybe we just leave it status quo, and if it costs us 200,000, like Mr. Patel said, or 250 or 150, then maybe it's better off that, you know, it's on the tax rate. So depending on what that figure is.
And it does seem like in the numbers that I'm presented so far, that it basically costs $1 to collect $1. So the whole point of pursuing parking program and new machines and new equipment and everything like that, you could save yourself a lot of time and hassle by having 2 hours free parking and having enforcement on that, right? Like that. And if it all ends up being a zero-sum game either way, why not give people the benefit of the free parking, right? Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
No disrespect here. I think it's actually costs about $4 to make $1. I mean, looking at the last 10 years financials, to Carrie Ann's point earlier, I mean, it's never really been a winning game, right? And I do see a lot of numbers that are in there that don't necessarily relate to, I mean, they are over and above what you need to do, but things like the transfer to reserve for $103,000. I mean, that's a losing game every time you put it in the budget, right? Like it looks like, geez, we're down another $103,000 on top of the $300,000 we already lost because we have that transfer to reserve in there. So, you know, to see a loss of $400,000 after all your expenses are paid in the last term is super frustrating as a business owner. You can't carry on doing things like that. If the corporation of the town of Midland does have an extra $400,000 to lose, I mean, maybe we should look at different programs for downtown where that money could be used better, like extra bathrooms or more street outreach or more things that make it a better business friendly environment for people to come down and shop without having a bylaw officer presenting them a $25 ticket.
And those are good points. I think I was thinking of it in sort of in 2 buckets. There's the one bucket, which is the revenue and cost of parking itself on its own and independent of everything else. And then there's this other cost, which for me, the bucket is the cost of having a downtown, right? Parking lots, parking, clearing, maintenance, lights, poles, sound, whatever all the things are, right, that are going on. So there's a cost to having a downtown. It's a kind of weird thing to wonder whether or not what the intent of that is, but there is a cost, but that cost is already in the budget. It's already being paid for, right? It's not like there was a bill not being paid or there wasn't something going on. It's already there in the budgets. All those items are already covered. But really the only net difference really, right, is the equipment and costs and labor and everything involved and the revenue associated with parking, right? That's the only thing that we're really sort of juggling here, right? Is that part of it. So the fixed cost of it, right? It's sort of like at some point you have to say, well, do we want to have a hospital? Do we want to have a downtown? Like it's a fairly basic decision, right? About that. But it seems like you can't really go back on that. And it's in the public interest to have a downtown, right? So it's always funny to me to have that second bucket at all. So I'm agreeing with you, Scott, maybe in a roundabout way that yeah, it is really and I think we've said at different times around the table here that no matter what happens on the revenue side, it's not going to cover the cost of having the downtown, right? It just isn't. So we know that that's a fact. And so the discussion has turned a little bit more to, well, what could we do within the confines of the parking specific things to get to a positive number, to look at the value and the costs and everything of doing that. And basically what the town wants to do, right? In terms of the access and attractiveness and nature of parking in the downtown area. Go ahead, Jess.
Through you, Chair, to you. So the hospital does have a paid parking. So it wouldn't be relative. Yeah, I know what you're trying to say, but you do have to pay parking there as well.
Just to get it on the video, that was not my point.
Yeah, but you were relating downtown to the hospital.
I said, does the town want to have a hospital? Does the town want to have a downtown? Does this town want to have a skating rink and a rec center? That was my point. My point was not about parking.
Thank you, Steve. And then what Mr. Campbell presented with the the 400, the 2024 budget, I just want to go back to that type of, you know, net loss, I guess it is because of the parking program that we had the last 2-3 years. It has cost us money through failed attempts of different revenues. You know, it's $2 free parking for seniors. It's all over the map, so it's not consistent. So I don't even want to look at those numbers. The past numbers are the past numbers, right? So what we're here right now is what are we going to do from this day forward, and looking at the numbers and right now the true numbers that we're going to have, whether it's will be in 2024 when there isn't a parking program, and then that's basically what I think we have to look at and say, okay, how are we going to get to, you know, where some of the parking program pays to offset some of our operation costs for maintaining the lots and so forth. So there are different areas, and I did put in, you got all the one that Owen Sounds program is, but I'm not sure when we can start talking about that program. It's an item on the agenda, so that was a little bit interesting that we might be able to follow, possibly, and without the expensive machines, or as I said, what is that cost in 2025 if we do not have, well, even 2024 right now, what is the cost? But the 2024 numbers, you know, we have all these you know, increases in expenses because of pulling out the machines and so forth. So it's not our true cost. So in 2025, what is it on the tax? What's the tax hit on the tax base? So, and that's kind of that percentage would kind of give us, you know, a little bit of a better idea of what the expense is. And right now we don't have much of a bylaw presence, right? So in the downtown, if we have street and daily rate parking at $2,148, right? So because there is no program, so and then take the fines right out of it, because if we only have street and daily rate parking at 2,000, fines should be probably close to, you know, it's minimal, unless it's the boat launch passes. Well, they're not getting fined. So, but our court fines are 4,500 in revenue, and that's probably from 2023, I imagine too. So, right. So really, you could say we have revenues of 23,736 that we actually know, and the 2,148 that we actually know that are true costs, and that would be our revenue of 25,000. And then these expenses are right now are just not true expenses for 2025, and that's what I'm trying to break it down to. I'm not trying to take the past numbers. I don't think they're true to, you know, our labor costs are up in since 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and so forth. So trying to get those true costs and see where we're, and I don't know if are we able to get that probably by the end of the year of somewhat of a, what's the tax hit on, because before we've always had, you know, for plowing the lots and taking the snow removal, we've always had that, whether we had parking or not. So, and I'm trying to take that out of it too. I just want to know if a machine versus labor and expenses of that machine is going to give us a profit, right? So, and if we're not profitable just on those two factors, I know we have, right? Then the expenses are always going to be there with the lots, line paintings, lights, and so forth, and we have to pay for them no matter what.
I need you to just clarify for me when you say the hit on the 25 tax rate. So right now, 401,902. So the net expense, right? That's the amount that's built into the budget. And so, as I said, we didn't budget for all those removal costs. So those aren't in the budget. So that's not within that number. So, you know, you're kind of bouncing back between actual and budget. So I'm gonna bring it back to budget, right? So for the budget, we've budgeted 400,000, which is essentially a non-parking program. There is still a bylaw presence needed because of the boat launch, which we're getting revenue for, which doesn't offset the bylaw cost, as well as the 2-hour limit, right? Enforcing that, right? So there is still the need for a bylaw, which then does still result in some fines. Again, not fines like we saw before with a paid parking program. So much of these costs will remain in 25. And so when you're asking me sort of what's the change for 25, there really isn't one, you know, so other than we know our labor costs are going up, right, from our collective agreements and whatnot. So, I mean, they're going to go up incrementally, but there's no significant change from 24 to 25 that I'm anticipating at this point in time. There was a change of 1.4% between 2023 and 2024 because we pulled out all of that revenue out of the budget that we weren't realizing, right? So not only were we not realizing that revenue, but we also had our expenses were also actually much higher than what we budgeted, right? On sort of the parking meters and the maintenance of those meters and whatnot, right? So that's again, sort of going back, that's really why the parking program didn't succeed, because again, our revenues did not exceed those incremental costs of the program. So yeah, we weren't even coming close to covering the grounds maintenance and the taxes and all those costs that are there that are, like I said, are paid by the tax rate and should be, right? You know, to some degree. So it's like, how much of those costs are we trying to recover, if any, right, from this program? Or does it make more sense to put it on the tax rate and spread the burden, right? So I had given you an example of sort of, you know, a property that's assessed at 300,000, you know, so that change from 23 to 24 was about a $48 difference. So if I spend less than $48 on parking in a year downtown, I benefit, right? I've got more money in my pocket. If I have to buy $100 pass to park downtown, I'm actually out $50, right? Because I now cost me more to park downtown than it did if you would have just put it on my taxes. So I think those are sort of some of the things we should consider. Is again, is it a benefit to Midland? And when you ask me, is it a benefit to Midland? I'm thinking, is it a benefit to Midland as a whole, you know, from the downtown as a thriving downtown of what's on your taxes? You know, what is it affordability for everybody, right?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I get it. So we're saying that, so when we're talking budget, this is the 2024 budget. You're saying the 2025 budget is going to be similar to the 2020 the 4 budget? Because we shouldn't be 400 and well, actually, we're heading that way. There's your actual, there's expense totals at 338,000. So we're heading that way.
If
Right?
yeah, if we move forward with a
So-
sort of a non-parking program next year, just like we have this year, yeah, I expect that budget to not really change. Does the bylaw portion become 20% instead of 25 because maybe the committee has, disbanded? Possibly. However, that doesn't change the tax rate because that bylaw time gets redirected to other bylaw services, right? Because there's likely a list a mile long of things that are not, that can be done, right? So it doesn't mean that we necessarily adjust our complement. In 24, we did adjust the complement, right? Because we had 3 students previously that we eliminated because we said, hey, we don't have a parking program. We don't need the students roaming the streets. So we addressed that. So, we've kind of taken out all the revenue, but we did take out those other incremental costs. We took out the costs that we were paying for the maintenance on the machines. So, and again, I'm just sort of scanning it quickly, but there's really nothing else left that kind of comes out of that line. So, yeah.
Thank you. And that's fair to say and good to know because, we went through a budget process of last year and we came to a blended rate of 3.99. So So I know that you go into the 2025 budget that we could be there or possibly a little bit less. So if we don't have a parking program. So and then we'll get into discussions as well through you know, the next whether with the machines are an option for 2025 or to be I will what else I will say one thing when I look at downtown right now, the last 2 weeks, well, last month or so, you know, lots are full. Downtown spaces are full. Drove by today. It's full, right? The only one that's not full really is the harbor. The harbor front is about half full the majority of time. Towards the fire hall, I don't see that there. So which is good that people are coming downtown and the parking areas are full, and I haven't heard too many businesses complain right now of spaces being taken up for a while, and so forth. It would be interesting to know on that 2 hour limit if we're tracking on where those fines are, or where well, I guess that revenue or so, if there's any revenue there. I'm sure there might be some, but where they actually are or what that number is. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you to the CAO. You had mentioned, is there money or getting rid of the parking program, putting the money on the general tax for the entire population of Midland? Is that good for Midland? I think what would be good for Midland would be, and I've said this before, you know, we need kind of a feel-good story that we can use to, you know, put Midland out there. I have friends that run similar restaurants in Aurelia and in Collingwood, and a lot of them are always complaining, you know, about aggressive enforcement for parking. When we did have the meters show up, I know of two businesses in particular that kind of gave up on their lease and moved over to Penetang because they didn't want to deal with the burden of the constant bad news stories that were coming out of Midland. Midland's at a point I see, you know, where we're not Collingwood, we're not Aurelia, we're not Barrie. For some reason, for the last, and I've been here since '95 selling coffee, Midland always seems to kind of get overlooked, right? Like Collingwood's booming, Aurelia's booming. Midland has a very slow growth rate to it. And any kind of good news story that we could publish, I think, especially for the downtown, when you see highway commercials start to get overdeveloped, and the downtowns for a lot of municipalities starting to falter, you know, a good news story about, hey, our downtown has 2 hours free parking instead of, you know, well, you got $2 an hour parking down here, and they're going to give you a ticket if you're 5 minutes late. Any kind of good news story is going to help bolster confidence in the merchants that are downtown, as well as probably drive more people as they hear these good news stories about how business friendly and how community friendly downtown Midland could be. So is it good for Midland? I think that's a good question. And I think to find the answer as to whether or not you should go forward with a parking program, I mean, that might be one of the things to look at. Is it good for Midland, right?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. So that brings me to the Owen Sound, where I think the revenue is shared, I believe. We're not, okay, so
Do we want to just move on to the next agenda? I don't know
Um,
if there's something more specifically on the financial.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if we're done with, excuse me, if we're done with Lindsay, then Lindsay has another meeting she's got to get to. So if we're, yeah, if we're done with the financial stuffs there, then the financial table that she provided, then we can move on. But I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you for your time and all the work put into that. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Lindsay.
All right, so on to our next item about comparable municipalities. I know there was the conference that you guys were at. Oh, it hasn't happened yet. Oh, that's between now and the next one, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, sorry, I forgot. Forgot the dates. Gotcha. So if we wanted to go back, then I think Jazz, you were just gonna transition into that on that.
Thank you. So, I mean, I agree with Mr. Scott here. Do we want a feel-good story? I guess, do we want to bring in paid parking? I think it will frustrate a lot of our residents. But then when I look at the Owen Sound model where they're sharing the revenue with the town, which the town doesn't, I think they're still losing money, but the burden is less. Do we want to put all the burden on the ratepayers? I don't think that's fair. We should kind of play as a team, right? The businesses, the town, and the residents. So that's kind of like the model I like, where we're kind of sharing the costs, not just putting it on one specific group, which wouldn't be fair, I think. And I believe in like a shared model, which I like from the Owen Sound. Thank you.
So sorry, when you say shared model there, what does that mean exactly? Did you get some more detail on that?
So from what I understand, so the levy, the is collected by the members, and then I think, is it 50%? Yeah, so 50%, so DIA 50% share of passes gets, DIA keeps 50%, but the contribution to the city from that revenue is 120,000 from, for the parking. The DIA gives to the city. Their BIA.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. I'll explain this a little bit. I was talking to a counselor from Owen Sound and she presented me with this and so their DIA is their district improvement area. We're a business improvement area, so their DIA is like their BIA. Their levy to their members is brings in $260,208 as we see there. So their DIA is built differently than our BIA. If you go scroll through down this, I don't even see labor in there, right? I think it might be all mostly volunteer. I don't see too much, but anyways, so they collect $120,000, and then they split the income with the town, 50 of all their passes they get. They get 2 hours free parking on the main street, 5 hours in their back lots, and then they have passes for businesses, residents, whoever wants to buy a pass, right? So out of those passes, I think they collected 50,000 and they split with the DIA. So the DIA received 25,000 from the town, which the contribution from the DIA to the town was $95,000. So that's how that kind of worked for Owen Sound. As I said, our levy right now to members is 175,000. That wouldn't work with those numbers. If we, there could be a contribution from the BIA and its members, but we'd have to take that to the members, right? But we'd also, I think with this model, we would have to increase, it's not, this is in the DIA, so our BIA, it would be subject to the outskirts of the BIA as well. Because there's going to be people in the surrounding the BIA that would benefit from the parking program. So they would have to contribute too. So I don't know how that would work. If we were looking to totally fund this, if we're trying to get 120 or 100 in excess of $100,000 from BIA, it's just not going to work. So, which resorts me down back to spreading it all across the tax base, right? So we definitely don't want to in 2025 put another dagger in the businesses downtown. It's been tough 2 years for most businesses, and with the issues that we have downtown right now, a lot of issues. We're seeing increased security down at our harbor going to be coming up soon. So, and then our downtown is at the same time hit with all the problems down there. Then we're going to hit them with, you know, another cost of maybe another $200 for the parking program, maybe more. But it would definitely have to go outside the BIA boundaries for anything like this to work. And I'm not sure how that would come across, but so I just want to explain that about the DIA, the own sound structure, from what I had my conversation with the Councillor Bravon down there.
Thank you, Steve. Through you to the committee, I have shopped in Owen Sounds downtown. They are a much bigger downtown than we are. They have a lot more storefronts than we do. So that helps with their levy for sure. It would be interesting to find out who's managing all these events and doing all the things because, like you said, there's no wages in here. So we already, I think we pay our manager in the BIA like $70,000 a year. So, we'd have to either get rid of her or I don't know how, like half of the BIA levy is already going to wages for our manager. So I'm not sure who the superheroes are that are managing all of this and maybe volunteering for all of this. Good for them that they can do it without a full-time staff, but that's not our reality here in Midland. So unfortunately, we don't have the volunteer base in the downtown that will allow us to rely on people to run events and do all the things that need to be done to run the BIA just on a volunteer basis. So I just wanted to kind of draw that that comparison with what I see here. So yeah, there might be room for a levy, and again, that would have to go back to the BIA, but it certainly wouldn't be in excess of $100,000 for sure.
Thank you, Chair. So they do have the wages of 65,000 if you look on the first page. So so they do incur an expense. I don't know if it's same as ours or lower. But just kind of, I understand parking, like downtown businesses, right? Parking meters does hurt business. We could maybe think about just bringing back the passes at least for 2 hours and more, and then have a levy to contribute as well, where we're not just like sharing the burden, right? That's basically what I'm suggesting, because I don't like to spend $1 to make 10 cents. So, and it has a negative effect on businesses' meters. We could look at maybe just having meters on the street level, not on the lot level, because street level is premium. And the harbor only, just the one side, not the other side where the boathouse is. And the passes, and see for a year what kind of revenue that is bringing. Just to kind of give you an example, when town wanted to bring the mat tax, like initially everyone sets 4%, the accommodation tax, but we decided on the phased in approach of 2.5, 3.5 and the 4% to see how the program is going to work and what benefit it's going to have on tourism to the town. So we could look at that approach, just have meters on the street level, harbor, and sell the passes and see what kind of revenue that brings. And if that's going to bring a good amount of revenue, we don't need the meters. We can just not have them ever and just kind of pay for the passes. But we got to start maybe somewhere. That's what I'm trying to get the message across. Thank you.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to talk about. We are talking about comparables. So if I were here last meeting, I was going to bring up some of my ideas. And some of my ideas have always been, and I've talked to David Smiley about this extensively in the past, about comparables of municipalities that don't charge for parking. So one of the ones that I always advocate with is Cambridge. So Cambridge has kind of transformed their downtown from a place that was suffering from, highway commercial growth. Their downtown was kind of faltering a little bit. They went in with some free parking initiatives, and slowly things started to turn around. So, and I had a great conversation with their vice chair of their BIA. The way that they run things in Cambridge is 2 hours free everywhere, on street and in the back lots. And interestingly enough, I know that this kind of goes against a lot of the preconceived notion that on-street parking is a premium, but I've always thought that, and when I watch people, they pull up in front of a business, they run in, they do what they want, and they run back out. Like if they're going to pick up something, it's great to have a spot available up front. Do some people abuse that? I know of 2 cars maybe downtown Midland that people complain about out of all the spots. So again, my recommendation that I would see in my perfect downtown would be free parking on the main street. And I think you're better off to monitor the lots. It's a bigger catchment area. You can put more cars in that lot and probably easier to monitor in the long run. There's more cars probably in the lot behind Value Mart than there are on the entire main street. So if you're going to spread out your enforcement on the whole main street, it's probably going to take a lot longer than it would to just kind of go around the back lots. So Cambridge, 2 hours free on the main street, 2 hours free in the back lots. They do have meters in the back lots, no meters on the streets. The meters in the back lots, you still get yourself a card that says 2 hours free. If you want to stay longer, then you pay for time. And they also have designated lots kind of further back, a lot of times for employees where, it's not just 2 hours free, it's 12 hours free. You can stay the whole day. They also have another lot that is kind of, it would be your passes lot, right? So people go and park their car there. The only problem, and him and I discussed this, he runs a restaurant / bar. When you have employees that pay for parking passes, and the lot being the furthest lot away, and Mr. Meredith, I know you can attest to this. If you have people that are leaving your establishment, you're a restaurant, and they've been making tips all night, you don't want somebody to walk 2 blocks to a parking lot with $400 cash in their pocket. So those nighttime parking passes, or those lots where people are choosing to park for work-related issues, there has to be some give and take for the safety of the employees or take, my bakers, right? They're there at 3:30 in the morning. So do they want to park behind where the Explorers is? Because that's the free lot where employees are supposed to work, and then walk all the way down to Grounded? Like, that doesn't make sense either, right? But I guess the basics is 2 hours free is great. You have to enforce it. And I don't disagree with some passes, because we did have an opportunity at one point where we were collecting money from passes, and that was an agreed upon thing that the BIA, we canvassed our membership. We had, an agreement. Everybody was happy. Business owners were buying passes for their employees at $99. And I thought that was pretty great, but then that changed, right? So as far as meters on the street, I think you'd also have to probably install more to capture that length of the street. Are you better off putting a couple meters in each back lot and try and capture some time there? That's the comparable that I have. I did a little research and talked to their BIA. He said every BIA meeting, they always talk about parking. Everybody always wants to talk about parking and garbage, right? Is all that they ever seem to talk about. But, and inevitably somebody comes to the meeting and says, yeah, but if it's free, somebody's going to park it in front of my business for the next 8 hours a day. And then I asked him, so how often does that happen in Cambridge? He goes, yeah, it doesn't. It's something that people complain about, and then it's an educational thing between the business owner and their employee, or the business owner and whoever's there, or maybe bylaw and whoever decides to park there, the 1 or 2 cars a month that decide to, occupy the same space for the whole month.
Thank you, Steve. Through you to the committee, just a question. Does anybody know, I know Aurelia, anytime I've parked there, I always park in the parking lots and I know it's paid in the parking lots. Does anybody know if it's on street paid? It is, yeah, okay.
So through you, Chair. Last meeting, Mr. Smiley suggested rather than having so many meters, just have meters on certain locations and then do the QR code like Collingwood. So you just scan the QR code, you make the payment, and so that way you avoid having so many parking meters, because each parking meter had a cost of, I think, $55 per month. So QR code has no cost, it's a transaction fee, which the customer pays.
Thank you through you, Steve. Just to comment on Scott's blurb with Cambridge there. I don't mind the idea. Something to look into. The only I would keep it simple and straight across the board, whether it's 2 hours on street and lots. The only reason I would suggest that, because if you're paying in the back lots, or you have a time restriction, then your main street may, and Cambridge hasn't had a problem, but I would be, if I was working at a bank or an employee, I'd be parked on the downtown. So I would be afraid of not implementing something on the downtown. So, and I would just keep it simple right across the board, everywhere, if we're going down that route, right? The one question I would like to ask Mike from bylaw, currently, and I know you just you're fairly new, the 2 hour and the 5 hour, or the 2 hour parking limit, the free parking. Have you been out there enforcing that, and if so, how does that operate? Are you chalking tires right now, or is that the best way of doing that in your experience?
That is a very good question. It is challenging to enforce 2-hour parking, only because you have to go out there and do an initial survey, document each vehicle and their wheels in some way, shape, or form. Chalking tires is a bit more of a dated version of things, but what we do in other times is called stemming, where we identify where the air valves are in each tire, either facing the road or facing sidewalk, and do that measurement. But you'd have to take a intro or preliminary reading and then do a follow-up in 2 hours. The other part to that is interesting and perhaps challenging is that if there's no proper signage on the roads, say for like, I think many of the side streets are labeled as 2-hour limits, but the downtown core is not labeled as thoroughly. And so there might not be as much understanding of the restrictions in the downtown area. But you would have to do essentially patrol, document each vehicle, license plate, make and model, and then their tires, and then come back and do a 2-hour resurvey again.
So through you, Steve. So I'm judging this it's labor intensive to do that type of.
It certainly can be. It depends on a couple of things. Certain technology exists where there's automated programs out there where vehicles can just drive by and it takes all that information in and processes it, but I get the impression that's not on the table here today. But the other part of it is that if the team can work together, we could have one person do a version of an inspection and then do a second person do a secondary inspection, but it still takes some time and energy.
One last comment there on the Owen Sound DIA, their parking enforcement, just so that you know, they contracted that out to third party. So it was a third party enforcement on that. So you knew your, I don't know how that worked, whether it's split costs with the with Owen Sound at the DIA district. So that was one key element on the DIA or the Owen Sound's parking, is they had third party enforcing their parking program.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair. So just on the topic that Mike was going over there. So when we do have these discussions with the vendors, one option you could even ask is, okay, so it's a 2-hour parking, free 2-hour parking. Maybe it spits out a ticket with the license plate of that car and they display it. And then that way it's not as time consuming for staff that they have to go and stem the tires they've got 2 hours free. It's on their dashboard. After 2 hours, you have to move. And if staff come around and they see that, they look at the dash, they see it's past 2 hours and they haven't moved, then they can do the appropriate enforcement. And if you are going to be there for longer than 2 hours, go to the back parking lot or whatever the parking fee is. So, and just one thing too, on Cambridge is here, it's, you know, the monthly passes are 62 to 110 a month that they charge. There is lots that are free for core area workers, so that is an option. But if committee is looking at passes and even the parking rate, there should be consideration on increasing the fees that are currently charged. $1 an hour, to me, a good news story. Midland charges $1 an hour. I live down by Barrie. I don't go down to Barrie because Barrie's parking is too expensive. Like, if that's too expensive, or I'll wait and I'll go down, like down the waterfront, it's like $20 an hour. So, you know, $1 an hour in Midland, that's actually a bargain in most places. And I think when visitors do come here, I don't think they mind paying it, because if you're not from the area, you probably expect it. I think it's more the residents, if there's passes or discounts for people that live in the downtown core, not even just the BIA boundaries, but if it's a downtown core, then maybe there's a discount on passes there, like a 50% discount or something like that. One thing that, you know, the committee has talked about as well is if you guys feel that you're not going to have enough time on this, you should be requesting staff to go to council and request more time. And one option could be that a parking study be done, because a parking study would look at supply versus demand. Where are the areas that, you know, parking is mostly requested? Do we have too many lots? Do we have should we be adding additional lots? Should we be adding a cash in lieu of parkland bylaw, which that basically means is when people come in for planning approvals, if they're short on parking, they have to pay per space. So in the city of Barrie, when I was there, it was like $1,500 per space if you got a variance and you were short. So if you were short 10 spaces, you paid 1,500 times 10 to the municipality. So, and that money goes into a pool, which then provides for parking. So there's different options. So that could be something that if the committee feels that they do need more time, that they're not going to have something ready for the 2025 budget, because we're starting those discussions in the next month internally, then we need to get something to council to request that additional time. And if a parking study is something the committee wants to retain a consultant to do that, then we need to have that ask as well. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for, you beat me to it, because I was going to ask if the committee would, you know, or recommend to have a study done, just because when we're talking about machines, the expenses of the machines, and then whether it's $1 an hour or $2 an hour, is it feasible? Is it, you know, what does that look like, right? Are we paying $55 a machine in software a month, right? And put all those numbers together and get a true number. And I don't know, Mr. Farquharson, if you can, because you've been here 3 years now. So was there a parking study done prior to, well, it was on that, it wasn't really on that, but was there an actual just focus on parking study done prior to the last machines coming in?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the best of my knowledge, no. The last study that was done that Mr. Smiley provided the committee was service level review, and it looked across the board of all municipality. There was a section in there about parking, but it wasn't a true parking study. So to the best of my knowledge, no, one has not been completed.
I just add one more
Yeah.
point to that. I think it would be, the conundrum we have is that it looks like it will cost more than $1 to collect $1. So that could be a great part of the parking study, right? Is to look at how do we optimize, or what technology or what methods or what other things could be done. And if it all is always going to be a zero-sum game, then that takes you one direction. But if it's a different picture financially, it takes you another direction, right? So yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Steve. Through you, and you know, I'm kind of leaning towards a study, because the pressure that this committee has to get it right, and I think we're kind of jumping all over the map now through 3 hour to machines, which was, you know, last week I mean, I think I'm jumping. I am anyways. I don't know how you're feeling, and it might be worthwhile to get to recommend, you know, just have it in the back of your heads here, because we have another meeting at the end of the month. By then I'll be going down to AMO, Steve will be at AMO, and we'll talk to some vendors, and we'll have the mini show. But it might be wise to get a consultant here, a third party, give us the information and just something to throw out there, and it's not a bad idea. I know, when you're talking about consultants and spending the money, but we do have to get it right here. We don't want to go back, whether it's it's feasible for free parking or 2 hours free, no machines, right? I mean, there's a lot of question marks here, and the expense of the new software and technology. I mean, with the new technology and software, it's a lot easier on our labor, right? And it's revenue. It's a revenue stream, big time. But what is that expense of that machine so far? And the past machine and those numbers, I'm throwing them out the window, because that was just, the expectations of $1 million in revenue was out to lunch, right? Because, we haven't collected that, a tenth of that, right?
Maybe
Yeah.
$1,000
but-
an hour, but I don't
yeah,
think anybody's gonna
so
go with that.
It might be a good idea to have a consultant come here and just focus on parking but it's something definitely to think about.
Thank you, Chair. So if we have the machines, there will be a cost. We could just maybe have least amount of machines as possible if we're thinking to go that approach. When you start bringing in a parking program, the company that manages the parking program is the winner. So going back to my initial thought, let's try to avoid it if we can, and do a shared program through passes. If a business has large number of employees, they can buy multiple passes, which can reduce the cost rather than each employee pay the same amount. Because if you have a large business, then have a discount rate for that business to have a less of a cost. So it's not so much burden on the employees. So start with maybe a certain amount. If you have so many employees, then you pay less because you're buying a group, like a ski lift, I guess. I don't know, if you buy 10, you get a cheaper rate. If you buy 5, you get less. If you buy 1, you pay the regular rate. Because meters will be a burden, and the town has to charge a certain amount to cover the cost of the meters. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Farquharson, right? To kind of follow up on the Cambridge parking passes, that the price of the $62 to $100 came up in the conversation I was having with the BIA vice chair. And he said, let's not even talk about our prices on our passes. One of the things that I know that they're trying to do with that amount of money is to try and encourage people to use public transportation. So because parking spots are becoming a premium downtown. So when you have a bank with 42 employees that all want to come to work one day, if everybody comes in their own car, then it's going to clog up the lots pretty quick. So he asked me a little bit, like, what's your public transportation? Is there like some kind of way that you guys can, encourage more public transportation? People take the bus down to work. So the Midland's not really quite like that, right? Like we're still a very car-centered municipality and area, right? Like you got people coming in from Tiny and all over. So, and he's not here to, you just have to believe me, I guess, on this one. But what he said, like the reason why he thinks the passes, and not that passes aren't expensive. I mean, you pay that once in Toronto, maybe if you go see a game somewhere, right? Like $62, park here, it's really close. But I know that when I told him that we had agreed to $99, he thought that was, kind of cute, right? But he also said that his understanding is the reason why some of those are very expensive is to try and discourage every single employee to try and drive downtown and maybe utilize public transportation a little more.
And through you, Stephen, to Scott's point, yeah, and in Midland, downtown Midland, we have a lot of parking lots. I believe, like if you go to a lot of downtowns, they don't have the parking that we do. So I think we have a sufficient enough of parking. And just touching on Councillor Patel's point, we won't be contracting it out to a third party. I don't know. You didn't misunderstand what I was saying about the consulting. We're not really looking for a third party to come in and take the revenues out, right? So we want to make sure our revenues stay in Midland as much as we can. Is that correct? Just to.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so there is a certain cost, and that cost we have to incur in order to make the revenue. That's what I was trying to say, like the $55 a month for the meter. And then I don't know if we have to purchase the meter, so there's probably a lifespan to the meter. So if a meter is about, let's say, for example, $10,000, 10 years later, or maybe 5 years later, or the maintenance on it, things like that, those costs I was mentioning that we have to incur in order to make the revenue. So if we can avoid it, let's avoid it and just do the QR codes. And set a free 3 hour, 2 hour, I have no problem with that. 3 hour throughout Main Street or back lots, or just have 1 hour on the main streets and 3 hours in the back. But there will be a cost to run the meters, and if we just do a QR code system like we did for the boat launch. Thank you.
And thank you through you, Steve. Yeah, thanks for clearing that up. I just want to make sure that, and that's why even when in your explanations, you're bouncing, whether it's 1 hour, 3 hours, whatever, bouncing around, right? Like, because we can bounce around ideas together and still be here 12 months from now. So that's why maybe a consultant is might be able to break everything down and
Well-
maybe a clearer picture. So,
Yeah,
you
and
know, to make us, because it's going to be tough. I think right now, the way we're going, it's going to be tough to make a
Well, and
recommendation.
the thing is, we have all these things that we end up talking about, right? Like the meters and Bill's favorite on the coins, but there's these go-to spots, right, that we all have, right, in terms of how that should work. But we don't really have kind of a comprehensive view of it, right? I keep going back to, like, is maybe one of the fundamental issues we have right now is there's not enough signage. So when people stop on the street, they look up and they don't see signs, so they figure there's no rules, so you go in, right? And that's what people do. And by the way, the machine was stuck in between 2 trees and 3 other cars, right? So it's not very obvious to people from out of town, right? So I just think another fresh set of eyes, right? And people that look across different municipalities would be good. I think the other one that always sits in the peripheral vision for me, but then I walk past it on the way here, is in front of the post office. Those spots are supposed to be 15-minute spots. I don't think there's any enforcement on that. And even if there were, they're treated as tax exempt still. So nobody's paying for that, and nobody's ever going to pay for that. And the town's always going to pay for that, right? And so, and now, right now, their employees probably should pay something, but we already have signage up, and if you're, everywhere else I go in Ontario, I drive around and I stop and I look up and I see what the rules are and I follow the rules, right? And here it's a little hard to do that. So I'm just trying to get back to the having somebody come in and take more of a comprehensive look at parking and the uniqueness of the situation here, and the fact that there seems to be an awful lot of parking spot for the number of people that are downtown. And look at historically, this didn't evolve from a little cart track that people built 2 buildings around, right? Like somebody did this not out of thin air, but they built this town to purpose, right? And it was designed to grow and accommodate this. And we're probably not big enough to even fit the shoes that we're living in, right? In some ways that look at things. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you, Steve, through you to you.
Yeah.
Just when I first started on the BIA in, I don't even know what year it was a long time ago, we were having the exact opposite discussions. There was not enough parking for everybody that was trying to be downtown. The BIA, the downtown merchants were screaming for more parking because their customers could never find a parking spot. It was a busy downtown back in whatever year that was. So I would love to get back to that. I would love for us to come up with a plan, a strategy, whether it be a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever plan to implement. As Councilor Emeritus said, we have to get this right. We've done this, the town of Midland has done this so many times, and so many times it has gone sideways. So I would advocate for taking our time and doing this right. And further to Councillor Patel's thoughts is maybe we build out a plan and we implement something a little bit here and then we kind of build that plan. But at the end of the day, it needs to be what makes sense for everybody, obviously. But I don't want to, just as we are starting to see and more and more traffic and more cars and spots downtown, I would hate to put something in that's just gonna like just take 2 steps back on this. So if we could get to a point where all of a sudden parking is a problem again because there's not enough spaces, then we can start to, we have a premium right now that now we can start to build a program that's going to be, but if we try to put that program in place before we have that issue, I feel like we're just going to push the people that are coming back. We're just going to push them away again. And I would really like to see us like do like I said, a staggered implementation maybe, or maybe consider something that looks like that. But I do think a study might be in order. We did, Scott, can you help me if you remember back in the early days, did they have, we did a parking study, I think back then. Were you on the BIA then? Do you remember?
The last one that I can recall was maybe 2012.
One's at Amazon.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking that was probably the last comprehensive parking study that we did, and it was around the time when we didn't have enough parking, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't,
help.
time aside, it wouldn't help because it's a different problem.
Thank you, Steve, through you. And to Carrie Ann's point, I think that's very, very good points that you made, because right now we do have enough parking, but with the expected growth, and our town staff has been doing an exceptional job at OLT hearings, clearing them all up, and we are, from what I know and what I'm hearing, well, what I've been told and what I see, the growth is going to come. So we cannot just look at today, but 5-10 years from now that these, our parking is bang on. So 20 years, right? So the growth is coming, and as I said, their developers are chomping at the bit to get started as soon as the economy turns around. And maybe Steve can actually comment on this, because he's the man. So
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee. So with planning, we are seeing quite a bit of pre-consultation requests coming in and phone calls coming in for development, not only outside of the downtown, but in the downtown. And as part of this committee, and as everyone keeps saying, we got to get it right, is our zoning standards in the zoning bylaw do not require parking within the downtown core. So if we get a proposal for a 6-story building with 100 units, they are not required under the zoning bylaw to provide parking. So that's something that, this committee, as they keep saying, we got to get this right, is we got to look at those potential redevelopments that are going to be coming down to the downtown. We want people downtown. It creates a vibrant downtown. It helps the businesses. That's the heart of your municipality, your downtown. So, while we want to see development on the, the outside of the downtown, but we want to see the investment happen. Midland Bay Landing is we're looking to move on that as well. So, that's down the road as well, but that's close enough to the downtown that when people do visit that area, what's the parking going to look like on that property? But then also in the municipal lots in the downtown core. So from a planning perspective, putting that hat on, there's a lot moving in the downtown core that we need to consider. And if there is a consultant that you guys do decide that, you want to do a parking study, as part of the request for proposal when we put out, we can talk to procurement, but we could even put a requirement that they've got to do some sort of public engagement. So it's great that we've got the committee and that represents the BIA, but then maybe there's some sort of open house where residents come that are not just in the downtown, but are living in other parts of Midland that visit the downtown, that they can have their say. So that may be an opportunity as part of that process. Now, there is an expense to doing a parking study. So typically these types of studies, you're looking at probably about $25,000 to do. Now, if we did this, we would probably have to do it through the 2025 budget. So what would happen is we would request it as part of the 2025 budget. If council approved it, then we would do it next year. If you guys are requesting more time, a motion would have to be done saying something like that staff report back to council requesting that the parking committee's mandate be extended to the end of 2025. Something like that. Because right now it's supposed to, you guys are supposed to be done by the end of this year. So just extend it to the end of next year. So that's probably kind of the path that you guys are going to have to do if you're wanting to proceed with a study and if you need more time from council.
Yep, sorry, I'm not sure who was first.
Thank you through you, Steve to Steve. Can you just clarify, you talked about the no parking requirements in the development bylaw. Does that include Midland Bay Landing, or is Midland Bay Landing maybe a little bit in its own kind of bubble?
Through Mr. Chair, so Midland Bay Landing will be a beast in its own. So if you wanted to see where there's no parking required, what you do is you just look at our zoning bylaw or our official plan. And the areas that are zoned downtown core, downtown core, that's the area that's exempt from having to provide parking. See if it loads up here. So basically what that is, it is from basically like Yonge Street down to Bayshore. And it kind of goes to like a big wide and it's got a little bit of a T. So then it runs along 2nd Street to Dominion, and then it kind of comes up Dominion and then down 3rd Street to Bayshore. And then on the other side, it goes all the way Dominion down Queen to Bayshore. So Midland Bay Landing would be outside of that. And then once that land is developed, they'll go through additional planning approvals. And once there's a builder or a developer on board, they may request something like no parking, but that's something that we'll have to look at and council will have to consider. But it's not uncommon in the planning world right now to require 0 parking in our downtowns. So, you know, as Scott said, you know, we're not a robust transit municipality. We're more transit than Tay and Tiny. And so that's why we have that exemption. We do have the transit there, but yeah, there's a lot of development coming forward. I wish I could tell you about everything that's coming forward, but it's pre-cons. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
So, and it's maybe a fairly minor point in this, but your earlier point about getting the free 2-hour ticket and putting it on the dash. One of the important things going forward, we take measure and track and understand what the patterns are and what parking's happening. And so any approach, I would think going forward, you'd want to make sure we're collecting enough data so that it's guiding future decisions, right? We get to stage 2, here's the things we're thinking about. We get to stage 3, we're going to do that. But if we don't have any data and we don't know where the parking's happening, then we don't really have much other than just another round of opinions, right? About things. Yeah.
And through Mr. Chair. So as part of the parking study, typically they have implementation periods. So it may say, you know, year 1, you know, it's a 5-year implementation plan. Year 1, we're going to implement this. And then maybe it slowly graduates to, you know, maybe, it broadens the area that the parking is going to be enforced. But usually, yeah, there's different, you know, metrics that you can have, because if you're at stage 1 and stage 1's not working in your implementation plan, maybe you need to go back and look at it. So it's not rigid, it's fluid, it's constantly moving.
So listening to everything that's kind of going around here, and I know we talk about like circling, right? I mean, we could probably, if we wanted to, just, I'm going to read some of the stuff I've scribbled down here, right? And there's talk about increased signage for 2 hours free everywhere downtown. Bylaw enforcement, I mean, we could limit bylaw costs by using bylaw on an on-call basis. We could do a further review of expenses versus revenue after the vendor show, right? Like, we don't really know what expenses versus revenue could entail until we know what the costs are coming from the revenue, right? Or from the machines. I'm suggesting at this particular moment in time, and nobody has to agree with me, that we carry on status quo with the burden of the ongoing expense be applied to existing tax base for 2025, revisit a paid parking program in 2026, before the 2026 budget, continue a parking committee to address the ongoing development in downtown and its impact on downtown parking, and work with a potential parking consultant, a potential parking consultant. You know, like we could stop a lot of the conversation if we just decided, you know, we're circling here, right? Maybe we get some extra signs. We put up the signs. If things are, it buys us time, because I don't think we're going to get it right. I don't think we're going to get it right before the 2025 budget. We're talking about hypotheticals about the meters, how much are the meters going to make? We don't know the cost on the meters until we meet with the vendors. So again, it's just, I mean, I could tidy it up and make a motion, or this is what I'm feeling right now, is that I don't think that we're going to be ready to discuss. If we get the aid of a consultant, it stinks to spend the money, but we could also do what we're doing now. And I'm not necessarily 100% well-versed in the way consultants work, right? I know what I think is right, and I'd be more than happy to tell a consultant what I know from downtown, you know, living and working down there for so many years. And I know what the general feeling is of the population that comes downtown. But as far as rollouts and metrics and things like that, like I wouldn't know how to put together a 5-year rollout of a parking program. I wouldn't know what metrics to look for of the first year, whether or not it's working, whether we continue on this track or we turn around. We could still keep on talking about it, but I don't think I'm smart enough to figure that out in the next 2 hours.
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, like you mentioned, just put it on the taxpayer until 2026. Should we at least look at the idea of bringing back the passes for longer than 3 hours until we figure out a plan, have some kind of agreed upon amount that, that the BIA can decide or the committee can decide that, okay, because the passes will have to come even if the parking meters come down the road. So at least we have some kind of revenue coming in. Then maybe we, like I said it earlier and I said it past meeting, maybe we don't need to visit the paid parking program until 10 years from now. If the revenue's enough. Thank you.
Yeah, just in response, what would you, like in my mind, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. So if there's 300 or 450 people that bought $100 passes, it's going to give you $45,000. What kind of numbers were you thinking the passes should generate to help offset that?
Through you, Chair. So $1 a day wouldn't be a bad idea, but that's why I suggested, like if you have a larger business, you have more employees, maybe your passes should be a less of a cost because you have a larger number of employees. If a store only has 1 or 2, I think for them it would be okay. Like at my place, I mean, we have our own parking, but I do a lot of my work on my own. There's only a staff of, 4 people. I incur the cost of my staff, like they don't have vehicles. So I pick them up from their home. I drop them off because they don't have a vehicle. They can't afford to take a taxi to work and back and forth. Our transit is not that good, as you're aware. So I think the ratepayers would not mind if we gave a multi-pass discount to a business where I understand, like, staff don't make a lot of money, right? I don't make a lot of money either, but that would kind of help the whole situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Through you. I would just, I would leave everything status quo. When you're looking at passes, there is staff time and staff expenses, right? So when you're looking at 2025, if we want to do a consultant, I would put the motion in right away and get this lined up for as early as, get procurement out there and this gets approved in the 2025 budget. And then we're ready to go ahead of the game with awarding that, if it passes, awarding getting the consultant underway. In 2026, this council goes lame duck, but the summer of 2026, right? So we need to have a parking program like from this consultant. If we get in 2025, mid of 2025, by the end of 2025, we'll have a program. And that program should lead us into, progressively getting into with the amount of growth and then just support all that. So that consultant will go through all that and give us the right information to make a recommendation to council. Or the consultant, would that consultant present to council, or would that consultant would present to the committee, I imagine, and then the committee go from there, or how would that work?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would probably have the consultant come and present the findings to the committee before it goes to council. But that's something we'd have to figure out as we start going through that process. Just everybody knows what lame duck means. Some people don't know what lame duck, you know what that means? Okay, some people don't know what that means, so, okay.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so my comments is, so we would have some type of decision made beforehand. And then anything in between, I don't mind the way the parking's going right now. I think it's positive for Midland, especially with all the negativity going down there. Just keep it as status quo. I don't think there's a lot of, and maybe Mike can comment on this, is there's a lot of enforcement other than is it just by complaint based downtown? I know you're fairly really new here, and but I'm not sure if we're spending a lot of time marking tires or doing the what you guys do to kind of negate the long hours of parking there.
Sure, yeah.
So but
Through the chair, that's correct. We only respond to parking complaints downtown as they come in, pretty much. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, it's just through Mr. Chair on top of that. So we previously didn't have the signage for the 2-hour limited parking. So that's one reason why we weren't we were waiting on just a complaint basis, but there has been direction from staff to be more proactive on bylaw across the board, not just parking, but across the board, whether that's property standards, parking outside of the downtown core. So staff are looking to be a little bit more proactive. You may have seen staff in the downtown the last couple of weeks doing just some patrols, just walking up and down. And it's not obviously not for parking really because of the 2 hours, but it's more so just have a presence in the downtown core. So, and I think the businesses would probably appreciate having bylaw down there a little bit more of a presence. So there has been, like I said, there is direction to be more proactive, and that's something that staff, when we have the resources that we can do, that's what we're trying to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Through you to Jazz. I'm in agreement with Councillor Meredith that we should just kind of leave it status quo. If we introduce passes, I see where you're going with that. The fee used to be $360 a year, and we had so many staff that were just running around and moving their car every 3 hours so they could stay with and they could park for free. And it was just a pain in the butt for most people, most businesses to let their staff go and move their car every 3 hours or whatever the limit was. So I think there was a greater increase in its passes and we haven't, I don't think we've actually landed on that number from the town. But I think there was an uptick in purchase of passes when we dropped it to $99. Where the sweet spot is, I'm not sure, but I feel like that's, again, if we go out and say, okay, it's going to be $360, you get a bulk discount, but then we do the parking program and we say, oh, nope, just kidding. Now you get to pay 200 or whatever. Like to me, it just seems like we're putting the cart before the horse again. And I feel like if we just kind of leave sleeping dogs lie, figure this out and then build a program like we know what we're doing and then avoid all that negative backlash. But I just had one other, and Bill, you might be able to speak to this. Is there any room in the BIA budget to supplement a parking study? Because it would be in our best interest. So maybe they have some money in savings, even if they split the cost that might be more attractive to the town when we present.
Thank you through Steve, to Carrie Ann. I can definitely bring that up at our next meeting if there's some, because they will be going into their 2025 budgets as well. And this is the time to set aside for that, type of contribution to the town. And in saying that, I just had a little sidebar here with Steve and seeing if we can, the sooner we get a consultant on board, the better, right? So I would have to, or Councilor Patel would have to put a motion into council and trying to get the approved funds for 2024, right? To get this consultant, procurement to go and find a consultant. So we could possibly, if we come to the determination that's the route we want to go, that we could kind of bring it up in 2024 and see if, whether it gets put on the 2025 budget, but paid for the whoever, CFO Lindsay would have been a good person to ask how that would work, but we could definitely try to put a motion in.
Through Mr. Chair, so what we would do in the motion that we have drafted that when the committee's ready is basically that they would retain a consultant, but then we would also have within our report on the extending the mandate of the committee to the end of 2025, that's where we would put the ask for the parking study. And then as part of the council discussion, that's when they can pick and choose which one they want to do. If they wanted, the way it's worded right now is just to include it as part of the 2025 budget, which I think is the safe route to do. And then if you guys want to proceed and try and get council to bite and allow for it to happen this year, then we can do that. Otherwise, it's at least if council supports that motion and we bring forward, it'll be considered as part of the 2025 budget. I don't know. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, I understand what you said. Yep. Yeah, makes sense. Giles, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So like sleeping on it, yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement. If we don't have something concrete done by 2026, and let's say, for example, something like the previous council and mayor comes in and implements without the consultation of a committee, they have the power to do so. So let's move on and come up with a good plan. And I want to support that plan. I don't want to make it my plan or someone else's plan, like a group plan where it's in reason to kind of, the town, the ratepayers and the downtown business. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
And this is, thank you through you to back to Jazz. So a bit of historical information about the passes. When the BIA canvassed all of their membership, what we were finding was, and you can see it, right? Like banks aren't hiring people for 40 hours a week anymore. Nobody's really full time, right? And there's a big influx in the summer of seasonal workers too, right? So people that were told there's only one option for a parking pass, whether it be $450 or $1 a day, $365, it really worked against the people that were working part-time minimum wage for 4 months of the summer. And then, so, and this will be part of maybe the consultation. If there is a pass that exists moving forward, it should be not necessarily, quarterly or not necessarily specific to one individual car. It needs to be, especially if you have multiple employees, like there's 17, I think, at our shop right now. So if I have, and even if half of them come to work all with a car, one day Crystal drives, but the next day Faith drives. So do Faith and Crystal both have to buy a pass, or can we get one pass? Those are things we can talk about in the future, but historically, that's where we came up with the $99 for anybody kind of working downtown. It benefited the people that were only there for 4 months. It benefited the people that were making $15 an hour, working 20 hours a week. So.
Thank you, Steve. Just a question to Mr. Farquharson here. Just to be clear, so if we wanted to present to council a motion to get this started in 2024, if that's what we decide after, the end of the month, that is doable other than finding the money in 2024? Or are we waiting until the one motion that you're drafted is for 2025 to get it rolling in 2025? Is that, I want to get ahead of this. I don't want to this to drag on, for 6 months in 2025 by the time we get, because consultant studies do take some time. So I'd rather have more time at the end of 2025 to get this right. So I'd like to start it in 2024. Possibly, I don't know how it works with the CFO, and I just take funds, add another $25,000 or whatever that consultant fee is to the 2025 budget, but start it now. Like, I'm not sure how the municipal part of the financing works.
Through Mr. Chair, we would probably, I would assume, would probably pull it out of the reserves. So, I mean, you can change the motion, how we have it worded to be considered as part of the 2025 budget. And we can change it to have the study done this year. We just felt that that was probably more of a realistic time is to propose it, because rest of council may say, you know what, no, we don't want to do a study. We want you guys to proceed under your mandate to provide something, and we want you guys to do it. So that's why we felt if we do the 2025 budget, but you guys we're at the will of the committee. We can change it to whatever you guys want, or you can leave it the same. And then when we bring up our report, you can always suggest that to council to say, let's try and get this thing going. The committee does have some momentum on this issue. And we'd like to try and get the consultant retained.
Yeah, and I think through you, Steve, and I think that it doesn't hurt to go to council in 2024, see if we can get out of the reserves or however we're going to do it. If they say no, then we'll wait for the 2025 budget to get it through. But I think that we're meeting here, it's still fresh, and we go monthly meetings or however it's going to go. I think we
Yep.
just keep on carrying
Well,
on.
and sooner the better. I
think-
mean, we're sort of at risk too of the public perception of it's been how long and where are we at, Be nice to get going and make some progress on it too and have some real steps sooner. So yeah, they're working on wordsmithing this. So is it coming together okay? 'Cause we probably should get ourselves, we're getting close on time here, so we probably should get close to wrapping this up and make sure we get a motion in.
Yeah, I agree. And if it's 25,000, it's, it's a drop in the bucket really on the tax base. It's not that, I know it's 25K, but it's not the 400K that we're losing every year. So this will be the 400, but it'll be a little bit less. So
It's not going to be $1 million a year in revenue, so
Yeah,
that's the other
so-
number.
I think it's the way to go. So do we put that motion through today? And would we, in saying that in that motion, would we still have this this mini kind of trade show at the end of the month, or will we postpone that, or will we still carry on with that? I guess.
I would say we should still go on with that. I mean, it's an RFI, right? And then we've asked people for some time to spend with us. So it's probably worthwhile just for informational sake, right? And make understanding of everybody. Yeah. Okay, so we've got a draft motion here. I'll just read through it just to see if we're okay with this. The Ad Hoc Parking Committee discussed the Town of Midland parking program options, recommend to council to consider the retention of a consultant to conduct a parking study in 2024, and that staff report back to council requesting that the Ad Hoc Parking Committee mandate be extended to the end of 25. Does that sound reasonable? Someone want to make the motion? Carrie Ann's in there. Jazz, you can be second. All right. So that's a good discussion and some forward progress down the field. So that's always a good thing. Yeah, yeah.
So what I'll do, Mr. Chair, is this will be on the September 4th council meeting. I'll scramble to try and I'll try to get it on the September 4th. Otherwise, it'll go September 24th. So we'll try and get it on the next council agenda. Yep.
Oh, yes, because the motion, it's yes. So we should have a vote on this, and the voting people are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So everybody in favor of that motion? That's unanimous, so we're good. All right. So with that, We have the meeting on the 28th that's set up for the open house. I guess we just set an item in the agenda still to talk a little bit about that vendor fair, and if you had some more information on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a meeting tomorrow with the manager of procurement and the clerk. Because we're trying to figure out where it's going to be. The clerk wants it here because we record our meetings and it's a lot easier to do that. The manager of procurement was wanting to have it over at the rink in one of the meeting rooms there. One thing, because this is a fact finding meeting, we're not talking about prices. We can't talk about prices at all, how much it costs for their machines. We can't do anything like that because it may get in the way of any sort of procurement and them being able to bid if when we go forward. And if one of the people here that, you know, business A is charging X and business B can come in and say, well, I'll undercut that person and I'll charge this. This is all recorded. So it's not closed, it's open to the public, but the public is not able to participate. So they can't ask questions. So this is where the clarification we're trying to get with the, between the clerk and procurement on. So we have quite a few vendors, actually. I was actually quite surprised. Just let me open it up here on how many we got. So we have one, two. We have 8 vendors that have submitted. So what we're envisioning is that the vendors will come and give a presentation to the committee. And then there'll be an opportunity for the committee to ask questions. One thing that we do have to ensure is that we do not say anything bad about the vendor that we had previously in the parking program. They are one of the ones that have submitted to come in and give a proposal. So we just make sure that we're not comparing it to another provider in a negative way. The idea in this is just to say, okay, you've got this type of parking machine, you know, what does it do? Like what technology, you know, what advantages do you have? Stuff that's generally public. If it's something that may compromise their business, we have to be very cautious on that. This is a very unique type of, you know, process that we're going through. And I think that's why, you know, I need to have this meeting with the clerk and the manager of procurement tomorrow, is because I think there's a little bit of confusion, but we are still going to proceed with it. At the end of the month, everybody is still available, right? There's not going to be anyone who's not going to be there. Do plan on it being the entire day. It will be a long day. We will be starting probably at about 9 o'clock. And I think what it'll be is each vendor, I think it's about 20 minutes and then 15 minutes of questions. We have coffee maker back there and Scott, yeah, Scott could bring coffee. So, I was very surprised on the number we got, quite honestly. I didn't think we were going to get 8. I was thinking maybe around the 4 range, but we did send it out. Manager of procurement did a good job getting this out. So we will provide the committee with a list of those that are coming. So I only recognize a couple of them. And there may be other ones that, you know, maybe they're more popular in other municipalities. I just don't recognize them. So, but yeah, we just want to make sure, like, we just got to make sure our questions are pointed. We're not asking about financials. That's one of the big things. And don't compare it to, I mean, you can say like, our previous provider had this machine. What does your machine have? We just have to walk that line, and the manager of procurement's going to be here. So if we start to ask a question that's a little bit outside, she'll rein us back in.
Great. Great to know. So when it comes to the machine, you know, or machines, if we wanted to get a pricing, not at that meeting, but down the road, would procurement provide us that, or how would that, like the pricing and then I guess software charges, monthly charges, that kind of thing? Do we ever get to know any of that. We're just picking the machine that fits. We're not picking, sorry, but getting information from the machines and which could lean us towards a few machines. So who does pick the machine then? Like,
Through you, Mr. Chair,
In the end.
council does. So the idea of this is only fact finding. So we're only hearing about their machines and their technology. We can't get into the financials. So as part of the formal RFP, when that goes out, that's when we would be asking for that information. And that's very tight, closed type process. So the evaluation committee, so for example, on other ones that are planning related, it's internal staff that review it and then we provide, and we pick someone. So then we provide that recommendation to council. So I think once we get to that point with that additional RFP, if it is the committee, I'll have to clarify that with the manager of procurement to say, okay, now that we've had this fact finding session, when we do go for a formal RFP later on in 2025, what's the review process? Who's the review committee? Is it closed in camera? Like how does that work? We can go through those details.
Okay, so just to try and get us closed out here for the top of the hour, the other item on the agenda is to set up the next meeting date, which I suppose in one sense we could leave it to be August 28th, but probably need to also find a time when we can get back together. Probably after Labor Day is going to be cleaner for most of us here. September 5th is probably the first one. And then after that, my September's not awesome, but could we, yeah, sure, go ahead.
yeah, since we have that motion coming in, and then we have possibly on the 4th, but probably looking like later in September that that motion will come through council. I don't think at in September there's really a need for us to meet because I'm not sure what we're going to be talking about in September. We're going to give direction, hopefully, and council, approves our ask and sometime in either the first or second meeting in September. And then that'll give us kind of some direction of, yeah, we got approval for the consultant right away and to go to an RFP. So I'm not sure if even September would be logical to even have a meeting in
Yeah.
September.
I mean, the
That's
other way we
my
could,
thoughts.
yeah, sure, and that's fine. And we could always just have schedule a short meeting towards the end of the month, might be one way to go too, just to regroup and get the latest information out. But maybe what we can even do is just leave it until the council meeting where that's discussed. And then when the decision gets made there, then I mean, we're all around to answer messages and stuff, so we can figure out a time then. Does that make sense?
Yes, one other comment would be in that meeting, we can can we have a discussion? Because we're gonna have that mini trade show, right? And then we won't, that'll be a long day. We won't be discussing anything then maybe bring that meeting, the next meeting, bring our thoughts on what possibly we can discuss.
Yeah,
some of that.
even just to summarize what we saw and what we
Possibly at the
thought
end of
about it.
September, or
Yeah, that's a
Steve, do you
good
have
point.
any?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, what I would even, maybe what we can do at the end of the, I don't know if we're calling it a trade show or whatever, with the manager of procurement there, maybe we can ask her, are we allowed to, in our next scheduled meeting, put this as an agenda item to discuss? And see what she says. If she says, no, you can't do that because of procurement, blah, 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 and then we know. One thing I mean, if we're realistically the staff report, it'll be tight to get it on the 4th. That means the report has to be done into the CAO by Tuesday and we're at AMO. So it's probably going to be the 25th of September that report goes. So then we will know by the 25th if those motions were accepted. So you could meet the 26th if you wanted to, and that way you'll know.
Well, let's just do that. Let's just pencil it in for September 26th. And if
Okay.
it doesn't
we-
make sense to have the meeting, we can always push it.
Yeah, and we don't have to confirm the date today. We still have our meeting at the end of the month.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
we can always
Yeah,
change it when we're with the vendors.
So September 26th, 24, 2 p.m. here is the thing. Somebody want to move to make the motion, Mr. Meredith? Jazz, we'll go to number 2 on the list there. And that one I don't believe we need to vote on.
Oh, sorry, yeah, okay, so that's a meeting. Our technically, our next meeting is the 28th. Sorry,
Correct.
did you say 28th of August? Is that what you meant?
No, I was saying 26th of September, we were
Okay.
penciling in for our next meeting of this committee in this forum, I guess. Is
So
what I
our
was-
next the vendor meeting is
Yep.
it's still a meeting.
I understand.
Yeah, so that's why we don't want that to say September. Otherwise, that means we're not meeting until September.
Okay, after 28th vendor fair.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. That's good. And with that, it's just after 4 PM. So are we good to adjourn the meeting? Mr. Meredith will move, and Carrie Ann, would you like to second? September 26th, yeah. I did, I got